Hey, Fiends of the Pod, this is your host, film critic, and comedian Nate Wyckoff, reminding you to like, subscribe, and comment. You can also go to cultandclassicfilms.com/subscribe and sign up to have cult exclusive movies sent to your door every single month. These are ultra low budget exclusive films that we get to you in the best quality possible with tons of extras like commentaries, milk caps, autographed posters, slipcovers, all sorts of neat things. And remember, every time you like, subscribe, and buy a movie from us, you prevent Michael Bay from making one more film. So go ahead, subscribe, and enjoy. Welcome, friends and fiends of the pod. I'm your host, film critic and comedian Nate Wyckoff, and I wanted to pop in here to give a special introduction to this broadcast of our May 2022 interview with film auteur Adam Thorn. Adam Thorn is an accomplished ultra low budget filmmaker from Toronto, Canada. He also hosts the Terrible Fest series of film festivals in Toronto and online. So check him out at terriblefest.com. And I am extra proud to have as Cult and Classic Films' first film distribution release a double feature of Adam's films Assault on the Snakemen from 2020 and Muppet Pastor from 2017. Assault on the Snakemen is a comedic action horror sci-fi film featuring mutants that are snake-like and need to be defeated in order to protect humankind in the near future. Muppet Pastor is the combination of The Exorcist and the Muppets that you did not know you needed in your life. These are two fantastic films. They're very niche, funny, unique, and creative, and Adam should be commended for them. And please pick them up. You can go to cultandclassicfilms.com and buy these individually from our shop, or we have a brand new subscription service, which you can find at cultandclassicfilms.com/subscribe. It is a Patreon, and for a discounted price, we will send you our new releases every single month. We will have brand new cult film releases every month. I cannot wait to share with you what is in the pipeline. And this first release is a really excellent way to launch the entire endeavor. So remember, you can go to cultandclassicfilms.com and buy either the a la carte films as well as tons of extras. We have special editions that have milk caps, remember retro milk caps from the 90s, as well as autographed posters, reversible slip covers. These are really great things, and you can buy many of them individually or as a collector's set. So check those out and make sure you go to our Patreon, cultandclassicfilms.com/subscribe, so you can see those great discounts and awesome benefits we have, including the chance to actually be on the show. So thank you so much. And without further ado, here's our interview with Adam Thorn.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends, to a very special episode of Cult and Classic Podcast, the podcast where we normally bring you two movies, one that is cult, one that is mainstream, but both that are thematically linked. I said that in the most complicated way possible, which is appropriate because my brain has a bunch of crossed wires today. That's okay, because I am with Adam Thorn of Riot at the Movies. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing great. My brain always has crossed wires, so I totally understand. And we're going to talk about things that are cults to be classics, so it works out.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And that is sort of something that I love about. We've talked before we started recording a little bit about the pandemic and how it sort of drove a lot of us online to sort of live our cult film fantasies because we couldn't go out and couldn't have that face-to-face contact with a lot of people, which some of us are still trying to get after post-pandemic time. But it really started to bring, for me at least, and this podcast, a lot more of the contemporary cult attitude films that aren't old enough or maybe even well known enough yet to be cult, which sounds weird because we always think cult films is nearly unknown. But there are new movies and recent films that are truly cult films, and these ultra low budget, no budget films that you sort of, you always have your nose like right to the spigot of these films. How do you get the new movies that you talk about?
How do I find them? I
Yeah.
think just straight out addiction. You just live in a different world, and you're looking for them automatically. It's like going on to Instagram when you scroll enough and you click enough of the same things, it just starts to be the only thing you see. And I think my eyes do that anyway. There are so many of these guys and girls who are out there for so long doing these films and nobody knows it, but they've done it for their friends, or they've done it for a small audience of their local town or whatever. And that shows, and that needs to be supported, that these people have this passion for so long. If no one's seeing it, to me, even if it's terrible, that's a crime. They need to know the story behind these things. They need to know that these things exist. I I self-published a terrible book a long time ago. I like to use the word terrible. And when I and my father-in-law owns a bookstore, and he carried my book. And one day he made a comment to me saying, "All the titles that you made up for that book are really funny." And I'm like, "Yeah, they are. I love them." And he's like, "Where do you come up with those ideas?" And then it dawned on me, it's just a book of reviews. That's all it was, of real films. And I'm like, "Oh, did you think I made all those up? Did you think those films aren't real?" And he's like, "Yeah, there's no way that like half of those titles, that Blood Fart Lake is real. There's no way that like it goes on and on and on, that our Crackoon is real." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, those are all real. Not a single one of those movies is made up." His look of just, I don't know what to say next after that, which all I could say was, "Well, I'm glad you read the book." But, but
Yeah, that's
it's a different world.
and it's true. And you, of course, mentioned Bloodfart Lake, which is Chris Seaver, friend, fiend of the pod, and often guests on here. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people, Chris Seaver has sort of elevated to the next level of that no budget filmmaking with his Warlock Video and Low Budget Pictures, because early on he got things on streaming, with Netflix and things like that, I think, for certain regions. And so people sort of, even beyond the few video stores that carried rentals like that, they started to see these things and think, oh, like there's this whole other level of films that they do not reach the mainstream. Like for my work, reviewing, being quote unquote one of the bad movie reviewers for horrornews.net for a long time, the movies that I got were not generally even that level. They were often the sort of occasional like highbrow indie film that had a lot of money but didn't have big names behind it, or they were the dollar bin, $5 bin, 488 special, you know Croczilla verse, et cetera, like those type things that maybe had a Walmart shelf release, but was they're really just shelf warmers, right? And those movies even they have an expensive budget. It's a lot of money to rent the equipment, et cetera. And yet we get the really shot on video, from the late 80s all the way up to now, these home brewed films, like your own films. I mean, I think I first really, we found each other on Instagram, but I found Adam Thorn's films with Assault on the SNAKEMEN, which I absolutely love that movie. And I have my own copy in back because it wasn't on DVD at the time. I just had the digital release, and I was like, I want the hard copy. Now it has been released. I don't think it's still available through SOV Horror, correct?
No, it was just a short time. There's a whole story with that, but we did that with SOV to be like a charity gig. So It was just to raise some money for other people's projects. So they did it just for a short time. So at this moment, that film is in limbo now, but we'll see what happens.
You can still get it online though, I think, correct?
Yeah, I've got it on our digital server. If you search for the archives of RIOTATTHEMOVIES.com, you'll find it. But also everyone who's on like our Riot of the Movies Patreon gets all our past movies for free. So those kind of sit there now. So the people who want to make comments on them, they already have it.
Right. Well, maybe it should be re-released direct to order with a certain cover that somebody made up purely for fun. That would be me. And if anybody wants that, I'd be happy to send them over the DVD cover art that I made for it, because I loved it so much.
And the cover really is that good. It's at a moment when I was like, what else am I going to do with that? the only reason that movie got finished at all was because of the pandemic. We started it just before that. We bailed on it, and like a year later, there was like lockdown had just ended over here for a little bit. Of course, it came back, but that
Yep.
one moment, none of us were working. Like the 3 or 4 of us who actually were turning characters in that. So we're like, okay, we can't get anyone else back. We're not doing anything else. We don't believe we have time to start another film. We were gonna scrap it. They're like, let's just wear wigs, pretend we're all the other characters, and just finish the film for the hell of it. Just so we said it was done. Because I had brought in my friend Austin, who was new to that group, and I was like, I need a film finished with Austin. This kid who is 2 feet taller than me, who's the youngest of all the guys in our films, we're like, I need someone to see you do something. And he'd done little tiny 30-second shorts on like YouTube or TikTok before, and I was like, why are we not doing this? And it was just a need to have it finished, and that's the only reason it was done. So then when that was done, immediately I moved on to something else. But it'll come back at some point. I'll make, everyone has asked what I should do is have just a Blu-ray that's all my films on there, and I'm totally willing to do that. I just need to wait for the right time.
It's totally understandable. What I love too, though, is, and I legitimately like that movie. Like I have anyone who's listened to the podcast, which I hope everyone has for a long time, knows that I will watch anything. I really will finish it, because if nothing else, I have to know without a doubt why I hate something. And I don't hate Assault on the Snake Man. I really enjoyed it. It has everything I look for in the low budget passion project, which as you noted, oftentimes from the filmmaker's perspective is dead and wants to be pushed under the rug before it's complete, because it is so much work putting together a feature length project. And I think it's about an hour on the dot, right? Somewhere
Yeah.
around the 56 or something. And it's just a fun movie. Everyone seems to be having a good time, and that's something that you don't always get in that next tier up, the $30,000 to $300,000 features, where I'm like, wow, this Eric Roberts did not want to be there that afternoon, and you can really feel it. And so it's nice to see a movie that everyone's having fun and enjoying themselves in. You have a new movie that is for sale right now, I believe, through you directly, right?
Yeah, this one we just have for both digital and physical, and was like every single thing I've ever made was a joke that someone made to me and dared me to do it, so I did it. The joke was, everyone has an Amityville movie, so
Mm-hmm.
why don't you? So we, without naming names to not bash any other fellow filmmakers, there were 2 films that my friend Robert and I had watched together, and we hated them. We hated them so bad. Out of the many, many, many Amityville films out there, even with our ability to give free passes to so many filmmakers, we're like, oh, this was cheap. I
I can
feel
bet
like
I,
I
I
got
can bet
ripped
I
off.
can name which ones, but we'll be nice. But
Yeah,
I'm
we'll be
sure
nice.
they're in the past
And
couple of years, they're recent
yeah,
entries.
well, I mean, there's been a bazillion, and they're not Mark Polonia. That's all I'll say. They're
Mm-hmm.
not Polonia.
Right.
Many people might think that, but I can give Mark a pass for forever for everything he's done. He's one of the
All I
reasons
needed
that I
was
exist.
Feeders 1, and everything else that he will ever do is just gravy.
Yeah, yeah. The back when the teenage mustaches were in there, the Polonias were inspiration to anything I've ever done. But so no matter, they can and have done some of the worst things in the world, and I will forever forgive that. But this other filmmaker jumped on the bandwagon more than once, and um, we were so grumpy about it after watching it together. My friend Robert said, "This is more like an Amityville outhouse," and immediately I turned to him and said, "I'm making that. Get back to me in 6 months. I'll have it ready for you." And it happened. Which now we have the world to witness perhaps my lowest level of lowbrow comedy in Amityville Outhouse.
Well, I'm just sad that it wasn't out in time for us to include in the zombie ass Toilet of the Dead pairing that we did recently. But I'm sure we'll have to do another lowbrow plumbing humor situation, or lack of plumbing humor situation. I'm really excited for it. I am an Amityville buff, and I have watched probably the vast majority, if not all of the Amityville spin-offs and rip-offs, etc. And I'm looking forward to every new horrendous entry that anyone wants to throw in the ring. Like I just saw today the release cover for Amityville Karen. We have Amityville Shark, obviously, it's almost here. Well,
And Amityville in Space comes out next
Amityville in
month.
Space, very excited for that one. I have to say, all of these have fantastic covers, and that is one of the things that I absolutely love about these no budget pictures, is because of just like the ready availability of film equipment of various qualities that has allowed us to make these movies with almost no budgets or no budgets. We have distribution processes now which allow for, like, you to pay the smallest fee to a great artist and get a really fantastic cover to show you what the movie could have been. It's almost never what the movie is so much as the aspirational goal of the picture. I
And
love
that's why I didn't let SOV Horror use your cover, because someone would have really thought that. They raise my expectations too much. I will throw a company under the bus for that, and I'm sure they don't care. Wild Eye Releasing, an
yeah,
incredible ending plethora of films from people all around the world, and whoever has been their artist is way too good to be their artist.
yeah,
He
I agree.
he or she or they, there might be a couple of them, are so good. I consider that the digital age's answer to 42nd Street Grindhouse film trailers. Like,
Yeah.
you see those trailer mixes from the 70s, and those trailers make I Dismember, Mama, and I Spit on Your Grave, and I Drink Your Blood, which I actually love that movie.
Don't
But
Touch My Sister, all those. Yeah.
and that era, just they go on and on out of that whole genre of just click titles. The titles have an angle to them. The trailer has a bit of an angle to it, and some cool music in there. And they spent more time. Usually, they had like Joe Dante edit that when he was just
Mhm.
an editor for
Which
Corman.
makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and those were better than the whole film. So you thought, this is incredible. You went in there. At that time, I think it was the drive-in era. It was the time that you were young and could go to a theater because you could be in a place that you could make out in the dark when you weren't at your parents' place anymore. So you were a little bit more forgiving of how bad those were. But now, in the quick digital age, the trailer's not important, because you sort of know, we know that joke now. But now
Right.
it's the cover. It's so that when you're scrolling through on a streaming system, or you're going through in an order page or somewhere, you see that poster and you're like, this is, even if this is bad, this has to be amazingly bad. Then you watch the film and nothing happens. And
Yeah.
you feel pretty cheated. But it's still, if you're into this type of film, there's people who complain about being cheated, but people like me who are in the scene of it, I just got to give it to them. I got to be
Yeah.
like, oh, you got me again.
Yep.
For
And
you
it's
guys.
true. It's sort of that. It's the fun. It's like a candy grab bag, right? Or like the popcorn mix where you're like expecting caramel and you get like the really orange cheesy one, and you're just like, I don't know how popular those are in Canada, but the popcorn mixes, and you're just like, that wasn't what I expected, but I knew it was a risk. I knew that was a possibility. And my favorite is Sub Rosa Studios SRS, who of course their covers, I absolutely love their covers. And you know, when you're getting an SRS movie that it could be a great, like, schlocky shot on video 90s, like hidden gem, or it could be uh Mark Polonia's Hell on a Shelf, which we reviewed this year, which is the first where I was like, I'm not even sure. I don't know that I really need this on my shelf, but I'm going to keep it because the cover's pretty rad.
Yeah.
Like that, even though I adore the Polonias, there's a time and a place. But yeah, so it's I agree. It's sort of, it tricks people in that will probably be mad, but also for those of us that we know the game now too. It's sort of like, oh, this cover is too good to be real. This is going to be my kind of movie. It's going to be, I know I'm not going to see what's on the cover, but I like the promise that they're running here. I like the risk to reward ratio. The other thing that I really love about these low budget pictures that going through, and I urge everyone, go to riotAtTheMovies.com, look through your reviews, is you'll come up with reviews for things that have never been released officially, they're just on YouTube, student projects, weird things like that, which is something that I think I consider those the golden grail, right? The old, like, wow, I bought a stack of blank VHS tapes and somebody's, like, 8th grade film attempt was on there. I feel like I've been given a gift from the great Allah. Like, it's just really awesome. When you watch things like that, what triggers in your brain that makes you enjoy it? Because like, my wife, for example, sometimes will just be like, I don't want to watch this. I just don't want to watch this. And yet I am enamored.
I think I compare a lot to the found footage festival guys, where they will go through tapes and they use stuff of anything, but one of their favorite things is when they find a like 80s home video of that's just stayed recording and it's just like captured them. Because like guys like Seaver that we mentioned, I think my true guide of this is like Todd Sheets. They're in these student films that I find, and where they're someone's first time, they may never do another thing again, which is why I push it, because I want to poke them and find out who they are. They're this mystery that maybe this thing's been floating around YouTube for a really long time and no one's seen it, and I kind of want to know why they didn't continue. I can't think of the name of the guy who made it, but I found a film online called Disaster Squad. I think that's what it's called.
I read your review.
Yeah, it's just 3 guys who are running around from boxes that are attacking them, and then goblins show up. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. It's kind of a superhero film, kind of a fantasy film. And I had sat there with it on save on YouTube for a long time, of this curiosity of these high school kids doing something. I didn't watch it. Then all of a sudden I saw they posted again, and I realized the years between the first post and this was 12 years. And they made like a funny sequel as adults, and was actually, I mean, not good, but I mean, it was much more slick on there. So before watching that and seeing just a bit of it, I was like, okay, I have to finally watch the first one that they did in high school. And I'll be honest, I'm more enamored with the high school one than the slick later one. But it's that mystery. Then I get addicted to it, because I'm like, now I need to know, where did these kids go? Why did they not meet again? Did they stay friends for that 12 years and then just meet each other and say, well, we got nothing else to do, let's do this? They didn't do it for a job. They did it because they really, really wanted to do it. As much as you also know that they had to put a lot of effort into it if they were doing it completely for free. Even if you say, oh, that's garbage because it's so cheap. But imagine wanting to film and fill an hour and even an hour and 15 minutes, and you are a bunch of high school kids with just one camera, no sound equipment, no nothing, no props or anything. The very concept that you get it done is a lot of work. So that obviously means it meant something to them at the time, and now it's lost in the abyss. No one is ever going to see it again. No one's ever going to look at it, because I don't know, either they were embarrassed or just nobody liked it, whatever the story.
Or they had lives that they were not, one.
Yeah, they had to eventually go and make money, which, I mean, we're all victim to have to do that. So there's all sorts of stories, and that's what I want to find out. So that's why I kind of send a few messages here, and then that's how my film festival got into play, because it became an addiction to sending messages to these guys, to being, why do you do this? I love it, but I don't know anyone else does. Can you get me in contact with the other people who do? And then you find they're out there, and you find all they do is they need a chance to be seen. And sure, they may not all of a sudden get them the next big gig, but they will discover that after just being shown by somebody else, they'll gain another dozen friends, and one of them will show it to somebody and they'll gain another dozen fans. And it just takes that little kick to find a new audience. And I know that has always been a big payoff for me. And so far, the ones that I've done for other people have been a big payoff for them, including several of them to start up again, which may or may not have been a bad thing for me to do that to.
Yeah, I think we reviewed way back in one of our earlier episodes the puppet 50s sci-fi parody. It came from Uranus, or Uranus if you're
Right.
crass, which I am. It was from 2012. I'd found my copy at a Goodwill in New Hampshire, but it was from Canadian filmmakers. And recently they got in touch with us, Paul Barescu, who directed it, with some great stories, and hopefully we'll be able to get them all on the pod to talk about it. It's a really fun project, but that was what this was, right? Like, I couldn't find anything about them. I just had this one DVD that somehow drifted down there, and when you actually do connect with the people, it's this, you have this kinship with people that you've never even met before, because you have this shared experience and you both have an interest in it, even though you're coming from different angles, maker and consumer. And it builds this weird sort of community that I don't know about anybody else, but especially in this pandemic and post-pandemic ish era that we are now, like, that's kind of been what's holding it together, because otherwise I don't know where we would find like minds. I can't imagine what this would have been like, going through COVID-19 without the internet, for one, being young enough to remember when it wasn't really a thing. And now, like with the terrible 2-day fest, like, there was no streaming, you know, thing that was going to play Snapper. You know what I mean? Like the the pirate video stations and really bizarre uh 70s style cable channels were no longer. It was the late 80s, early 90s. We didn't have that. So I didn't have a place to find this kind of niche, personal, if terrible, film community and products, whereas now we do. And I think because it's more accessible, we are getting more people. Like, I've seen several people who are successful TikTokers, former Vine people, who are starting to make their own features. And a lot of them actually have a little money behind it, but some of them don't. And when you get these, when you see people, even if it's terrible, which I think is kind of what we're getting at, there's something super special to projects that are made by people who have a vision and are passionate to get it out. A lot of times we're like, well, it petered out at the end. Well, because it's hard. It's really hard. So sometimes things get out there that are just the best you could do with the spoons you had to use, if you know that analogy. And so I love these. I wish, I don't know if you remember, if you got these in Canada, Pendulum Pictures, it's now past
Oh,
imprint.
yeah, I have
But
all those collections.
yeah, they've released, I think, 350, movie sets amongst some other smaller sets that were essentially all relatively unknown, not in release, shot on video films from the 80s to 90s. Todd Sheets had a lot in there, I think.
Yeah.
And, those are the kind of things that, in the know, and now of course they're out of print, so you're going to be paying $50+ for them, but I will tell you, I think they are worth it. But those are the kind of things that I see, and they really were what inspired me to return to my love of cult film, because I was like, these are movies that historians of film will talk about later, because most of them are not going to even survive the next decade, right? Like, they really are going to be gone. Hopefully somebody will bring them back or do something. But like you said, you self-published a book of reviews and stuff, which I want a copy of if that's still in print, or if you can print that up. So let's make that happen. But these are movies that people made without the help of big studios, without the help, in a lot of cases, some did, but in a lot of cases, without the help of a bank funding or some sort of horrible loan. Some of them, they weren't even Kevin Smith maxing out their credit cards. You know what I mean? It was just, hey,
Yeah.
what do we have? Because we have a camera. Can that kind of looks like a fetus? Can we throw it against the wall? Las Vegas Bloodbath, for anyone, I don't recommend it, but it's got a certain audience.
I do. I recommend it, but but
it is. But yeah. So these are the kind of things that I think when we hear the word cult now, and it's not wrong, but you think of the big things, the things that have really become uh, cornerstones in cinema history, like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Night of the Comet, even. These things, they're actually fairly well known. But if you separate cult classic to just cult and classic, there are cult movies that are truly obscure. I mean, really, really, just people don't know. And I love that that you and Riot at the Movies kind of bring these out and look to bring these out, because even as you said, when they're terrible or you hate them, they just, I feel like they deserve to be seen and acknowledged, because I want everything I make to be seen and acknowledged. I hope everyone listening right now, all the fiends of the Cult and Classic podcast, go and tell their friends. I know they won't, because they're probably like me and don't have a lot of friends. And they're, they're usually like, please stop talking about some obscure movie that I don't want to watch with you. But there are those of us that love it, and I really appreciate sharing and bringing visibility to these, as you said, these sort of hidden, potentially lost for all time, one-time filmmaker projects.
Because, well, thinking again, using Todd Sheets, Todd, I think the reason he stayed as long as he did in that was he started doing those films at that weird, just the right time of that shot on video was getting VHS releases. So someone was going to do something about it. But those who have been inspired by him, they don't even have that. You mentioned Night of the Comet being put as in the quotes unquote word of cult films. Whenever I go on a streaming site, it's on there, and I don't want to disclude anything from it, but that definitely movie is too good for that type of world.
Sure.
And I feel like I am in a world where I assume people think like I do. So when I'm working at the video store at iSoar Cinema, the people get that. When I go to my office job, and I go, well, you guys have all seen Night of the Comet. And they're like, what? I don't know what that is. I'm like, oh, I guess I have to realize not everyone thinks like I do. But the people who are doing these independent stuff now, either if they're student projects, if they're shot on video guys who crank them out like Apollonia does or so forth, they're a mix between Ed Wood, who couldn't do them every week because he had to do them on film. He had to do them to be processed. There was no other choice. And then there's a generation of people who are inspired by being, and this is really a very Canadian thing. I mean, the movies are not. The movies are Full Moon. Everyone saw that. But what clicks to me as a Canadian is when I was 12 years old, there was a chain of video stores up here called Jumbo Video. And in most of them, in the horror section, they built a castle around them. So it was this dark, gloomy castle with a bat hanging out of it that was in the horror section. So 12-year-old me would go in there, and at that year, that was the boom of Full Moon. So a whole row of it was all the same design VHS tapes, and they were raking them out every week. And they were scary, but they were still so
campy,
silly that like a kid could watch them. I mean, at one point it'd be all of this would happen, and then a totally naked woman would have her head cut off, and my parents would be like, oh no, we made a mistake. But then they'd see the next cover and like, oh, it's killer teddy bears, it's puppets, it's it's a robot. Okay, how bad could it be? And they were Charles Band's plan at that time was to be like a comic book company. He's like, these are going to cross over. I'm going to release them every so often. I'm going to put a thing at the end of every tape that's like Stan Lee's bullet pen, where I just come in and say cool things to the fans and read letters. So it was collectible, not only collectible, but there was always something new coming out of it. And then that begat everybody at home in the digital age, where they're like, I can do both. I can be Ed Wood. I can be Charles Band at the same time. Which is where, as I use the word a lot, addiction comes in. They're like, okay, I can now just do them short, but make a lot of them, so people have something to watch next month. They have something to watch the month after that. And what Ed Wood teaches you, what Todd Sheets teaches you, what Chris Seaver teaches you is your friends. If you find those weirdos who are the same as you, one, you'll have people to have as your backup. You'll have
Mhm.
people to become, if you know you're not going to be able to pay them much more than $20 and a pizza, you're going to have these guys coming back, and they're going to get better even if your films don't. They are going to get better.
Yeah.
They're going to get what they're doing. They're going to bring their own information to it. They're going to bring their own humor to it.
It's that Ted V. Mickles energy, you know, like
Yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
pull from the same circle and you build this little community, even some of whom are sort of opposed to one another. It's now the circle of, say, Ted V. Mickles, and you bring them in, and then your fans, you know, build up. It's like, oh, I remember so and so. Oh, that's so and so. Oh, you know, John Carradine again. Like, you know, you just get it over and over again until um, it's created its own mythos, and that's who, you know, like you said, a comic book company, right? Like
Yeah.
it's that idea. It's bringing the serial, the community nature, and maybe that's really what it is about these no budget films that I love. Is it takes a community to make these things. Even if it's, you know, one person is a vision. Yes, there are some films that are just one person and a camera, of course, and I hand it to them because that's extra tough. But it's the granular level of what it takes to make a movie. This person wanted to do it. These people have like enough mind that they are willing to join in, and they all come together to make this final product. And maybe it's because of the strife in the world right now, but I find it especially engaging to watch these movies, even the ones that are horrendous and unwatchable and technically just derelict of talent, or the ones that are mean spirited and well made. And I don't know what sort of insane, if you can hear that, I have some insane gardening work going on. We live on the Devil's Playground, which is what I call a golf course, and it is loud in here. But I just, I guess you said it. You know, it's like you get people coming in, you keep doing it, you're able to keep doing it because viewers start to grow little by little, and then you have this like-minded community of people. You know, it's why Todd Sheets' Goblin is one of my favorites. It's why that film
Oh
has
yeah.
any sort of, you know, following at all, is just because it didn't start all at once. You know, it's been a slow grind.
Oh
Uh,
man, you can't hear a thing in Goblin, and I think that's what got me really addicted because I'm like, there's something great happening here, but I'm also missing a whole quality of this film. So now I need to know. I need to like send an email to Todd Sheets someday and find out what was going on in that film. It, it would say my joke of Ted V. Mickles is, you know, he invented the bring a group together. His only problem is he married half of them, so you don't always want to do that. But the thing about Todd is what set this in my mind, and then when I saw Seaver for the first time, it's the same thing. And I can imagine a kid in the 60s seeing a Ed Wood film and thinking the same thing, and because the Ed Wood documentary, the film, the Tim Burton film really makes you think of this too, where you know the people behind this are a whole group of weirdos, and so the people who like to make these films were also a bunch of weirdos. So
yeah,
and especially right now in the internet days, and especially with the pandemic, just watching it at home, you're not even watching them in groups anymore so much, which is a shame. A lot of these films need to be watched in a group to really appreciate it. But you're watching them and you're seeing this returning group of people, be them playing different characters or the returning characters or not, and you think, man, I kind of want to hang out with this group of weirdos, but I
yeah.
can't. So how do I do it? How do I hang out with them without hanging out with them? Because I live on the other country, I live in other part of the world.
Or they're
I just
dead.
do the same. Yeah, or they're dead. I just do the same thing. I'll just make a film just like them.
Mhm.
So much so in my addiction, I think at some point with you talking to Seaver, you thought Seaver and I knew each other, but
I did.
I just follow his stuff and message him all the time. So much so that one of my friends up here, and a guy who, again, I use the word friend in an interesting way because I mean we only know each other from meeting up at conventions a lot, and we bumped into each other both wearing Warlock shirts, and so after that we exchanged emails and we would message each other all the time, and it was like a dare. Which one of us is going to get into a car and just drive down, find him, and make a film? And one day he messaged me going, "Guess where I just drove down?" I'm like, "Would you just drive down and find Chris Seaver?" And he's like, "Yep, I'm going to be in one of his films. I've just said I'm going to do it." because we kept daring each other and like, well, you
Yeah.
beat me to it. Because that's the addiction. We were all like, I want to hang out with these guys. They're weirdos like me, and I feel like I get it, and they get me. So if nothing else, we'll learn to express the same stuff. Right now with the internet is a lot of guys, because we're all doing green screen stuff. I do do a fair bit of this since the festivals and all the different artists that I've met. We've been doing a lot of films, and we're like, I want you as a cameo, but you're in Canada. All right, let me just film something and superimpose me into it.
Yep.
And then we do a good chunk of Amityville on green screen. I never did before, but we do it this time solely because I wanted to homage the fact that all these people are doing it. Now a bunch of us have been talking. We've done it way too much, so we're really glad that we can get out and actually film stuff again. But guys like,
Well, I think of Jordan Goff recently with dinosaurs in a mining facility. Like that's a perfect example of, any way now we have the opportunity to do things, whether it's with other actors or with CGI, copyright free images on YouTube, green screen technology in our homes, like what I'm using right now. If you're watching this on YouTube, once I upload this in a million years, we will, you can see how accessible it is to all of us. And it opened this huge floodgate. Like you said, it is a little tiresome sometimes. I know, being in the comedian circuit, I know so many comedians who have film credits in films. I'm like, what did you do? And they're like, oh, I like Jacqueline Passario was on here. She's like, yeah, I just filmed a fake suicide of myself on my phone and sent it in. Like it's
yeah, I mean, and however, pre-pandemic, as you mentioned, Eric Roberts has been doing that for films for the last 15 years now. I
yeah.
almost made one with him. He's at a convention and he said it would cost this much to do. And I was like, I think I have that much in the bank right now. And I didn't have a movie at that point. So we
Yeah.
were all, me and a friend were huddling, like, can we just tell him to go film something in the bathroom and we'll just make something up and we can use it later? I'm like, I might need that money. I don't know. And it was just really close. And he's like, sure, guys, whatever you want to do. And I'm like, you are so open to this, Mr. Roberts. I'm like, no, it's okay. Just take my $20 and sign this. I'm good. And I'm walking away going, you would have let me just film something with him. And at that moment,
Yep.
I didn't have anything. And it haunted me for like a year. And then I sort of made an idea out of that thought I had, but then was like, oh, I missed the chance because I didn't want to just record his voice. I wanted to physically have him there. Which I know I can do that. So maybe Eric Roberts will appear as a voice of an evil puppet in the future. But
that would be great. I mean, I remember, so I don't know if anybody has seen it. Riff Tracks has done it, which is great. A talking cat, exclamation point, question mark. Yeah, I mean, he recorded all of his lines for the cat on a cell phone in the living room. Probably could have done it a little better, but hey, he's in a good portion of that movie. He's a cat that doesn't look at the camera, but he's in that movie, and that's just the kind of crazy technology that it's every year there's new stuff that people are learning to use for these no budget pictures. And I hope they keep coming out, and I think they will. I can't imagine it stopping. I don't think, as you said, one of the great things about these projects is nobody's doing these for the money, right? Like, sure, eventually, because it's not, we don't have the video rental store market anymore. Even if you have the streaming thing, I mean, I know many filmmakers who've done, say, Trauma now, the streaming service for them, and the money is not, it's not there. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice to have because it's accessible and it's a good credits that you can say, hey, like, I did this, here it is, people can go watch it, but you're not making any money on it, right? And so when you make these, it is for the gratification of having a final project with you and all these people to say, I did it. Michael Bay, I made a movie that's at least as good as Bad Boys 2. So here you go, world. Like, eat it up. And I really respect that.
wait.
And
There's a movie better than Bad Boys 2? Where is this movie?
Deep dive for listeners. You can hear me and Tad Mastriani, longtime contributor, argue about that movie during one of our bad movies we love.
Are you on the upside or the downside?
I'm on the downside of that movie. Tad
I don't know if we can be friends
film
anymore, Nate.
I know. You and Tad can form a Nate Has Bad Taste podcast. You'd constantly have things to talk about. But before we get close to the sign off here, I want to give a shout out. Can you name your top 3 no budget, low budget schlockmeister filmmakers off the top of your head?
How many again? Just the top 3?
Just 3 and your favorite film of each. How about that?
Oh man. All right. Well then, yeah. I mean, for the SOV guys out there, the guys who totally do it themselves, who inspired me to do what I do, of course, Mark Polonia. Mark Polonia's the the favorite for me is Feeders 2, the Christmas one, because
The
that's ridiculous.
sleigh bells, yeah.
Yeah, but there's one that he did that didn't get released till way later. It was a project as a kid, and this is the kind of thing where you find this and you think, if I never saw anything else of this, I need to know who these guys are and what they did. It's Hallucinations with him and his brother and their early best friend at that time. They're the only actors in the whole film, and it is not only trippy, it's actually creepy. They all of a sudden, these two guys who have done all this schlock later on, you're like, wait, when you were kids, you could act. You should be in your films more, because there's actually something going on here.
I think that's actually on a
really
collection at SRS. I think if you guys
they
want to
did
dig
at least
that
at one
out.
point for sure. Yeah, they if nothing else, SRS's Vimeo on demand page has that. And then it's mentioning Todd Sheets. Todd, what? Nightmare Asylum. Nightmare Asylum is one of his, which it gets me every time, because one, is just weird characters all the way through. It's pretty much dream state. But at the end, in the credits, this shows that he was an angsty teenager like me. He tells off people in the credits that don't like him. He leaves like angry messages about people who, like, it says something like, if for all those people who every time they see me with a VHS camera think I'm making porn, go to hell. And you witness that he's grown up since then. He's now an adult, but that was when he was a kid, and you're just watching a person evolve, and so Nightmare Asylum stays in my head forever. And then I would say Seaver, but no, I'm not going to say Seaver, just because I am addicted to his films and love them. But the other guy who is the reason that I make bad no budget films is Waskovich, Mike Waskovich, the Suburban Sasquatch. I mean,
Fungicide is my favorite. If you've seen Suburban Sasquatch, go check out Fungicide. If you can't find it easily, because it is a little harder to find, I think on physical at least, you can get the RiffTrax version, which is also really fun at rifftrax.com, friends of the pod.
Well, Waskovich has recently sort of opened up his all his films, so that's why he's given a bunch to RiffTrax. Most of the streaming sites like Tubi and Midnight Pulp have everything he's made, even new films from just the last couple of years, which are just as equally great in their own ridiculous way.
And his newer films are he really reaches to try and be disturbing, if I remember correctly.
Even at the time, there's one, Tartarus, happened around the same time as Suburban Sasquatch, and Tartarus is an upsetting art film. It is, and it's weird because it has the same cast. So you're seeing the same people from Suburban Sasquatch doing really upsetting things. And after years of seeing Suburban Sasquatch, finally seeing Tartarus and being, what is going on? How did these people think both is okay? Which made me even more addicted to wondering, what is this guy? What is going on in his head?
I love that. I absolutely do. I will try. I will not duplicate any of yours, because I would also say Westovich, and I absolutely will say Polonia, Mark Polonia, and the Polonia brothers, when they were, when John was alive. And I would say for me, it's Feeders 1. Although House That Screamed 1 and 2 are both really fun. Also, I will say again, Ted V. Mickles. I'm not going to say Astro Zombies. I'm going to say Astro Zombies M3 Cloned, because good friend and fiend of the pod, Peaches Christ, has a cameo in that movie. And if you want to know about how to do quick cameos and pulling people using all sorts of different methods for your movies, try M3, which of course came out like only a million years after the original was filmed. And I think for my final, it's hard not to say Ed Wood, just because that is the most classic image of run and gun filmmaking in an era when you couldn't run and gun filmmake. You know, you didn't have portable cameras really. They're big, they're expensive. He just had to make enough money with these films to churn out to make the next one. And a lot of people don't know too, in his later life, he moved to making pornography films. And one of my favorite, which I think you can get it from Alpha Blue Archive, it's Necromania,
Mm.
and it's actually, you know, it's an R-rated cut, but then distributors put in X-rated material because they were like, no one's gonna buy this. But what I love about those is they still have Ed Wood's insane, and I'm using insane facetiously, but his really bizarre sensibilities in them. Like, if you watch one of those movies expecting to be aroused, well, you're going to get a similar feeling to what you expected going into you know, Plan 9 from Outer Space expecting to be scared. Like, it's not going to happen, but you will experience things. And it's that one vision that truly came out that only a special person with a special group of weirdos, of like-minded weirdos behind him could do. And so those are my three for this one. So
That whole genre of film is like finding a group of people who are hardcore Vinegar Syndrome film collectors now, meeting
yeah,
hardcore Vinegar Syndrome fans from 5, 6, 7 years ago. And those guys don't understand each other. In
they
fact,
don't.
they're creeped out by each other.
It's true. And that's one thing too, is when you meet someone like, oh, I love weird movies, and then they tell you something and they're like, I don't know, like I had somebody the other day, and I'm not trying to rag on them, but it did make me laugh because they were much younger. And they said the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And they asked me, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell. Like, I'm like, well, I mean, did you see Toolbox Murders? Like, if you're Toby Hooper adjacent, even though that wasn't him. And they're like, and I lent it to them, and they were not impressed. In fact, they were confused that I was happy with it. And it's just, you know, it takes some time, but I guarantee you that same person in 5 to 10 years, they will revisit that and they'll be like, wow, this is great. I can't believe I didn't know that, because your mind changes to adapt and read between the lines of all the cultness between films and between movies, and start to, your interest becomes more niche, right? I assume wine tasting is the same, right? You know, at the beginning, any $2 chuck is going to be great, but the more they know, the more insufferable they get to everybody else, because they're like, no, but you can really taste the chutney that they threw in the batch here at the end of the fermentation period. And everyone else is like, tastes the same as the $10 bottle that I had last week, you know, but you're like, no, really, like, pay attention to this. This actress is actually watching her kid off screen because she couldn't find a sitter. And it really works its way into the plot. Yeah. So
Working at a video
that's
store for so long, it's been also my nightmare to myself that I have turned into the cliche of a record store guy.
right.
Iceberg Cinema, where we do our events, for a long, when I worked there as a regular clerk, we were a store above a record store, and we were a fringe film store, so it's got to be the snobbiest, nerdiest place in the world. But it was a record store below us that was the hip place in town, so that if it wasn't for them, we would have had nobody. But when they would come up to our store and they would tell us that we were less nerdy and less snobby than the record store, it was this relief of like, oh, I'm always like afraid at this point when I tell somebody, because I was about to cut you off before, going, what are you talking about? The Toby Hooper produced
I know.
Toolbox Murder. What about the original? Well, come on, Cameron Mitchell here, folks. And then I'm like, wait, you're not an asshole, Adam. Don't say that.
I was waiting. It was a test. It was a test. And I recently, in fact, this week, as we record this, the episode that just launched on Cult and Classic Podcast, yes, we pre-record more than a day before, of course, because we are professionals. Sometimes we did Sidney Poitier's first directed film. We're going highbrow with Buck and the Preacher, and Cameron Mitchell plays, you know, the former Southern Confederate officer who's harassing these newly freed Black families as they go west. And all I could see when I looked at his face was every millennial's grandmother, like saying really like clearly racist but not explicitly racist things, except he had a mustache. I think he'd had his first facelift at the time. So like, you know, and that's all I could see. But every time I see Cameron Mitchell, I think of that film. And then I think of him as Santa Claus in Space Mutiny.
Space Mutiny.
Um,
That's, yeah. I mean, that's the golden time because again, for the westerns that he appears in, to the action films that he appears in,
mhm.
most people still don't know those films. Those aren't considered bad films. They are considered cult films because he didn't go out there to make bad films. To him, a preacher was the same as making Space Mutiny. I don't know how he thought those were the same thing, but to him
I
it
mean,
was.
he treated I mean, he treats the, that's true. And this has become a tangent on Cameron Mitchell, but he really does treat, and it's sort of a Nick Cage concept, right? He treats
Yeah.
every single role as though, like, with the same mentality and diligence that he treats every other role. So it doesn't matter if he's in a Francis Ford Coppola movie or if he's in a B flick where he's just going to be edited in
A
between
Leo
like
Fong film.
right, where it's just going to be edited into weird spots, or that one of the many like weird 60s-y espionage films where he's riding in the back of a truck as an evil mastermind, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, just any number. It's like the the John Carradine, although you can argue what the expert acting that he portrays, it tends to be very similar, but he has you know, he has a
Yeah.
presence. um so yeah, this is great. It's been great talking to you, another cult film lover. I expect a copy of your book,
My
and that's
plan is to I mean, that book is on Amazon somewhere. One of them is Bad Movies and Booze, so I give drink cocktails for every 3 movies. But because most of the reviews were done at 3 a.m. while coming home from a gig. But the my plan is to make a revisioned book, so I'm going to let those ones
mm,
die and make a
okay.
new one. Working on it as we speak. And Amityville Outhouse is available from me directly, so go to Instagram, right at the movies, rightatthemovies.com, and I'll lead you in the right direction for it.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep an eye out, listeners, for on at rightatthemovies.com and at right at the movies. And we will always share them at Cult and Classic Podcast, Instagram, and such as well, for the Terrible 2-Day Fest, which I hope continues for every year. If you miss it this year, there's an online component where you can see awesome movies, hosted by Adam Thorn himself. And as always, please send your reviews, your hate mail, your comments, why Bad Boys 2 is the best movie ever, or, you know, your sensible pro Nate supporting Bad Boys 2 is a terrible film, to cultandclassicpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at Cult and Classic Podcast. Watch as I trickle in videos of all our episodes for the past inception of the pod at youtube.com/cultandclassicpodcast. So many places to visit. But most importantly, follow, like us, and subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcast. It helps other people find us. And keep on checking www.cultandclassicpodcast.com, as we're going to have new things. There's a shop there. You can buy zines that support us directly, like my comic with comedian Dakota Freeman called Coco the Clown. A lot of fun, as well as our old RIOT design issues for your reading pleasure. Treat your ear and eyeballs. And we thank you so much. Place that, as always, is the Chud with All About Evil. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.